And action. Where to begin? It's the end of the week, and I want to sort of backtrack, start here, and then I'll take you to the beginning of the week. I'm going to walk you through what the week looked like. There was a lot of really great stuff this week, and a lot of really great ways that lessons unfolded, right? And some of that is because of the students, right? As teachers, we put that stuff out there, but it's what the students do with the lessons and with the activities that really either makes it special or can make it flounder sometimes, and it's not as great as it could be. Everything from, I'm still figuring this out. You know, the fun thing about doing a vlog is it kind of like gives me a chance to reflect on myself every single week, and I always talk about how important self-reflection is. I'm going to talk about, actually today, how I have my students reflect weekly. In a job where I think relationships are king, and this job's always only about the students, if I have a prep, one of the things that I'm noticing is that my friends that teach like primary school or elementary school, they have preps and there's no one in their room. There's no like wandering child, there's nothing. It's kind of like, it seems to me like a little bit of lockdown peacetime. But when you teach high school, it's a little bit more choose your own adventure. So what that might look like is me prepping on my preps and getting work done that I'm supposed to, but then I run to make a copy and there's 3 kids kicked out in the hallway and from another class, and I get talking to them and about, well, what happened? And how are you going to re-enter the classroom? Because I like to engage myself in those sorts of things. I like to know what's going on. I like to help another teacher if I can. I like to help kids not just sit in the hallway and stew about what's going on, but think about like, when I do go back into this classroom, was it my fault? If it wasn't my fault, how do I approach that topic with the teacher so I can have an actual healthy conversation instead of like just being pissed off and being rigid for the rest of the day and doing one of these things? How do I take this moment and move forward and excel today? This week was a lot of those conversations. It was a lot of sad kids in my room. It was a lot of kids that were upset. It was a lot of things going on. It was a lot of teachers that were angry about stuff. I love helping people air stuff out. I think I'm good at it. And I think that I like just making a safe place for people to come in and for me to feel empathetic towards them. That being said, every time I tried to make a video this week, there's a knock at my door. There was somebody needed something and it just didn't happen. With that being said, this week was infinitely better than last week, mostly because I was not sick anymore. And I don't like being sick. I've said this before. I'm too weak for that. Here's why I think this week was awesome, and here's not just the good stuff. Monday, we celebrate Columbus Day here in the United States of America, which is a very weird kind of holiday because Columbus came here and he didn't do such good stuff, you know? We celebrate him anyway. It's kind of weird. Howard Zinn, you just ruined everything. You ruined Columbus Day for me, all right? Tuesday went down like this. I gotta do something about this empty bulletin board. I just haven't had a chance to get to it. There's too much going on. Tomorrow I fix the bulletin board, right? Vocab board is in effect tomorrow, even though we only have like 3 full days of school this week, but it's getting done. Tuesday, the not-so-secret wife made some notes for me. We started Shakespeare. We started reading Julius Caesar. Well, the sophomores did. Freshmen aren't doing Shakespeare until around winter break. And here's what that looks like. Most kids do not like reading Shakespeare, right? And I know there's some of you out there, you love Shakespeare. Maybe your students love Shakespeare. My students look at it as, oh, why do we have to read this stuff again? Didn't we just read this last year? Yo, why does he even talk like that all the time? Shakespeare? Again? Can I go to the bathroom? And don't tell me to look at that magic 8-ball again. Now look, there's a ton of people that love Shakespeare. There's people that hate Shakespeare. There's people that have to teach it. There's people that want to teach it. For me, I appreciate Shakespeare for a number of different reasons. But I think a lot of times, right, stories are stories. I think that this for me is a good study for my students to see that 500 years ago, a lot of people were dealing with a lot of the same things that you think are interesting now. Julius Caesar, for instance, like we're still dealing with ideas of like, do you think fate is in charge? Do you think free will is in charge? Do your homies have your back, or are they gonna stab you in the back when time comes and it suits them better? There's a lot of these themes that are just reoccurring. And to be honest, it's kind of cool that somebody wrote something 500 years ago and we're still talking about it today. I think to have that kind of staying power is really, really interesting. And just before I jump into this, I would love to know your thoughts on this. As a teacher, as a parent, as a fourth grader, Jake, what are your thoughts on teaching Shakespeare in school? Do you enjoy it? Do you not? Do you think it's something we should still teach? Do you think it's something we should get rid of in curriculums? Do you not teach it? Is this more a Western culture thing? So like in Europe or North America, like, are you doing this in your country? Is it important? I just think that's an interesting topic. And so if you could leave that in the comments below, I would love to hear your thoughts on that. For my guys, Shakespeare is the only thing that's a non-negotiable during the year. It's the only thing in my curriculum that I'm not allowed to change. I get to pick whatever books that I want to read for the year, but teaching Merchant of Venice to freshmen and Julius Caesar to the sophomores is non-negotiable. And it's a good lesson, I think, for the students in like, hey man, you don't always get what you want. Sometimes you have to learn something because that's what you're supposed to learn. And that's what's gonna happen in college also. So let's learn how to make the best out of something you're not so stoked about. I hope this works for you. This is what I'm gonna try and do real quick. Quick rundown on what I talk about and how I try and make this interesting from the jump. A, Shakespeare didn't even look like this. Nobody really knows what he looks like from what I've read. And so I think that this is a really good, let's get this. I mean, you've seen this photo 100 times, right? A note to my future kin. If for some reason, I don't know, I mean, you're watching this video, so not everything would be lost. If someone doesn't know what you look like, if you make their picture and give them male pattern baldness and a weak mustache, I mean, that's not really, people love this guy. Why doesn't the picture represent it? I mean, he's not even handsome. Hook a dude up. You could make him look like Count Drago or Brad Pitt or George Clooney, Denzel Washington. So I go through a bunch of his life stuff that I think is important to me. I don't spend a lot of time on my PowerPoints. I have this theory, right, I'm gonna start talking about from here on out. This idea of bare bones teaching. I put the fanciness in how I deliver the information, not in what it necessarily looks like. Everything I do is pretty basic, but it's how I deliver it and how I want the students to engage with it that I think is the important part. Not just like, do I have a cool PowerPoint? I'm really playing to my strength. Some people make awesome PowerPoints. People that use like Prezi and stuff, I can't even figure that out, and I don't want to take the time to figure it out. So I just do this, and then I do my little song and dance in the front of the class, and that's how I convey the information. So we go through all this stuff, and then that's pretty much it. And I talk about Shakespeare, when he was born, when he died, a couple of important things from his life that I think are going to be important while we're reading the story. Then we address the speech situation with Shakespeare, because this is something that like kids get aggravated about every year. Little slide back here saying, why the hell does Shakespeare talk like that? And here's my answer to that. I always bring up our old friend Snoop, and I tell my kids that in 500 years, if anyone thinks that anyone is going to know what shizzle my dizzle means, I don't even know what that means now. I hope that wasn't even offensive to people, because I don't know what that term means. But that's beside the point. The point is that Shakespeare was speaking in slang that he thought was interesting back then, fun to talk like that, just like slang is interesting now. So 500 years ago, speaking like this was really interesting. Just like we have slang now that is interesting to us, but next year will be out of date. And this brings us to a quick talk about slang. I'm really interested in hip hop culture. In hip hop culture, there's a real importance that's put on being fresh, on stuff being fresh. Your clothes are fresh, what you're saying is fresh, your music is fresh. And although we don't use that term so much anymore, it's still a huge part of hip hop culture. A song that came out last summer, if you go to a party next summer and someone plays that jam, it's old. Yo, why are they playing this old stuff? Yo, why are we listening to this? This thing is old. And the thing I think is particularly interesting about hip hop culture, slang is the exact same way. Slang is always moving quickly because as soon as a term gets popular, nobody wants to use it anymore. With the exception of the word cool, I'm not sure why, but cool is like lasted the ages and is still cool to say. To prove my point about slang, I have this notebook that I started writing in about, I don't know, more than 10 years ago, where I have written down all of my favorite slang terms that my students have had over the years. I start the lesson like this. In 500 years, You think that anyone knows what this means. You're kidding yourself. That's my seed, that's my son. It's biting outside. You look hit, get flames, get ticked, boogie, edges going naked, stop getting base, you cut, you win. Salty, treat 'em, Joe ballin', ham, throw it off, scooping, getting loose, bread, dry snitching, donut, slow your roll, cuffed, crab, a dub, $20. Throwing jabs, booked, getting mugged, dollar boy parties, dollar boys, spending a rack, spending a pound, hit your jack up, chicken good, piping, spicing, roofed, jimmer, slumped, plumped, yanked, goat, aki, no rap, ring, you hoagie, you got leaked, top, liddy bop, my comments be flooded, huff yo, keeping it a buck, stamped, fresh on the wake up. I don't even know half of what I just said in there. The only reason I would know any of them is because I put the real world definition right next to the slang term. And this is great for students because what they see is that most of them don't know what that stuff means. Even slang terms that were out 1 to 2 years ago have already been lost in time. And so Shakespeare, when he speaks like this, he was speaking for his crowd. He was speaking in a way that was interesting and cool for them 500 years ago. And now that's since been lost, but we can still appreciate it because we can still appreciate Snoop. Next step in this fiery lesson, we break down the lyrics to this musical masterpiece, Drop It Like It's Hot. Some of these lyrics aren't appropriate for children. I teach 9th grade and I use the clean version of this. And I can't play this song for you right now because YouTube will slap my wrist, and I don't like when my wrists are slapped. But I do this. I take this song, I blow it up on the board, I give the students all the lyrics, and I tell them you have to circle every word that your great-grandmother would not know what it meant. When the pimp's in the crib, ma, drop it like it's hot. What does that mean? When Snoop says, I got the rollie on my arm and I'm pouring Sean Don, what does that mean? I keep a blue flag hanging out of my backside? What is he talking about? His patriotism? Killer with the beat? I know killers on the street with the steel that'll make you feel like a chinchilla in the heat or in heat. What's he talking about? It makes no sense. But it does. Your students know exactly what he's talking about. And that's the point I'm trying to make. This isn't very neat right now. I apologize. I take a lot of pride in my handwriting. But after that, I put all the names of the characters up on the board that are going to be in today's reading. I assign someone to that reading, and their name is on the board next to it. A couple of things about that. One, pick readers that fit certain parts. Because if you want them to read even slightly in character, you can't have the kid that reads like this with everything in class. You can't have him reading like a particularly passionate part, which is why I always read with them. See my name? Oh, Reynolds. I always read one of the characters, and my co-teacher, Miss Yonkers, reads a character every day as well, because I want to set the tone. If I want it to be pumped up, if I want it to be sad, if I want it to be energetic, I have to be the one that's going to set the tone so that the boys know that they need to match what I'm doing. If it's only the students, you might not get that same connection point. I try not to take the longest part or the most interesting part, just the part that I think can kind of like put some punch into it, and then we can jump into it all together feeling that same fire. All right, so here's how I get kids to read with some emphasis and all right, so here's how I direct the play while we're reading. We still sit in rows because I have too many students in my class and I can't move my desks in any other order than this without it becoming complete chaos. Also, breaking from rows seems to like set my kids like in a tizzy, like they can't figure out what's going on, like everything just changed in the room. So I try and just keep it the same, but I have them make sure that all their book bags are out of the aisle so they don't trip and fall and die on, and then haunt them in their dreams because every time they come into my classroom, because my ghost will be in here. That was weird. What it allows me to do is like zip up and down the rows. Let's say that looks something like this. By the way, we use the No Fear Shakespeare version of Shakespeare, and the reason for this is because we read both sides. There are certain parts that I think that the students will get through and be able to digest quicker in the modern text, but then there are large portions where we read just like what Shakespeare would have written back in the day. So I have 100 notes in here, and my notes tell me what character is going to act which particular way. So if I need someone to be like really creepy and weird, or if I need someone to be like super pumped, or if I need someone to be stoic, or someone to be like on fire at a certain point, I have those notes, and while one kid's reading, I try to move around, and this is a little distracting at first, but I feel like we kind of get past that eventually. I move around to different people, and I'll just run up on someone and say like, I need you to read this like you're really excited. I need you to read this part like you're super sad, like your dog just got hit by a car. I'm not someone that's done theater before. Like I was in that one play in the 6th grade in the Morristown Mall in New Jersey, where I played a computer salesman, Buzz. tried to sell computers to Santa Claus. I'm not good at this because I've done it before. I just think when you're excited about something, there's a greater likelihood that the students will be excited. The troubling part is that when kids don't care. So you have to be really specific about who you pick. I'm telling you, you can get those other kids to buy in. And if you don't, the hell with this idea of like, we have to win everybody over. Go for the kids that you think you can connect with and try and connect them and make it fun for them. And if someone doesn't want to care, or they're too cool for doing what you're doing, like whatever, man, you can't make a lesson that's gonna fit everyone. But I'd rather go for the kids that are gonna be pumped than the kids that are just gonna try and like suck up all of my energy. So when I'm giving direction, I'll say things like, I need you to be really sad, like your dog just got hit by a car. I need you to be upset in the way that like you went to the bathroom and you came back and your brother took the remote control for the TV. I need you to be weary in a way that you just came home from school, then you went to basketball practice, and then you went home and your mom asked you to vacuum. I need you to be disappointed, like you just poured a bowl of cereal and put some milk in there and 3 drops came out. Now you gotta use water, which is disgusting. I don't know why people do that. I just wouldn't even eat cereal with water. It's depressing. And that's how we roll through it every day. Whew, that was a lot of information. That's still one day in class. The rest of this is pretty quick. Wednesday had PSATs for all the students in school. Apparently there's a 9th grade version of that. That was pretty interesting. Thing to kind of take away from that is kids might want to fall asleep during testing sometimes. And here's how I wake kids up. In previous videos, I've talked about how I squirt kids with water to wake them up. But this doesn't really work because you want kids to stay calm and you don't want them freaking out because they're in the middle of a test and it's going to bother everyone else. So a more stealth way to do that is I take my trusty hand on a stick, but any yardstick would do. I take a piece of tissue or paper towel, put it on the end of the finger there. I just tickle kids with it, you know? First they think it's a bug, then they're not really sure what's going on, then they look up and it's like, yep, that's what I did, because I care so much about your future. I want you to wake up, finish taking this test or doing whatever you're supposed to be doing, and guess what? I'm gonna keep doing it the whole time. So you best wake up now. Tuesday night we had a meeting on Belize. We're taking students to Belize this year. My hope is to take 18 kids this year, up from the 11 that we took last year, to go to Belize for 8 days just before spring break and have the guys have a cultural experience. And I did get to talk to a couple of kids that evening about that experience, and here's what they had to say about going to Belize. Amir, why do you want to go to Belize this year?
Because I've never been out of the country ever, and I would love to.
Have you ever been to Epcot?
What's Epcot?
Epcot in Jerusalem?
No.
All right. It's not really in Jerusalem. It's really in Disney World. But why do you want to go to the trip this year?
Because basically it expands my horizons. Like I've never been anywhere across the world except for America. So like if I go there, it'll be a new experience.
Do you want to especially go because I'm going on the trip?
Yeah.
That makes you really want to really go. I know it, man. Real Rap with Reynolds.
Yeah. You got bars now, huh?
I'm from the street.
Oh yeah.
Miwan, why do you want to go to Belize this year?
Because I like exploring the world, and it's going to be fun. It's like see new things, meet new people.
Are you going to wear that GoPro on your head like you did all last year?
Yeah.
Miwan wore a GoPro on his head the whole trip last year because you just never knew what was going to happen. I'd say you were one of the guys that had the most fun on the trip.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was fun. So that's something I'm super excited about. I'm gonna have a whole video coming out about why I think it's important to take kids abroad, how I pick the places that I'm going to, and all that fun stuff, and how also you can help your kids fundraise for doing stuff like that so that they don't feel like it's just something that students that are well off can do, but that it's something that anyone can do. Then on Wednesday night, I had kind of a dream come true where I remember when I first started teaching, someone told me about a documentary that they saw on PBS. Here in the United States, it's a public broadcasting station. PBS had a documentary about this guy, Rafe Esquith, who started a classroom that was unlike anything that I'd ever seen. Like his 5th graders were learning how to play violin. They were putting on unabridged versions of Shakespeare plays. They were doing algebra. They were reading real books, not just like readers in class, but they were reading literature. It intrigued me so much that I read his book. I've read every book since then. I've watched or read every interview that he's ever done. And so I reached out to Rafe a few weeks ago and I asked him if he would be on Teacher Talk Live. And to my surprise, he said yes. The whole interview is on YouTube and it's also on iTunes, but we did hit this one spot that literally reframed the way that I had been thinking about some of my students that week. And I'm gonna share this brief clip with you really quick because it was just so impactful and it literally changed the way that I was in the classroom the very next day.
I have a thing that I do where I categorize in my own head kids as 3 types of children: kid 1, kid 2, and kid 3.
Yep.
Kid 1 is the gift from God. He comes to school. Hey, Rafe, I'm here to learn. My parents like you. I like you. And of course he does well. Anybody could teach this kid. A dead body could teach this kid. And on the other side of the room, this kid 3 who says, I hate school. I hate you. My father has a gun. And if you give me homework, he's going to kill you. I actually had a kid tell me that once. Wow. Yeah. And most teachers, Maria, spend 95% of their time with kid 1 or kid 3. You spend time with kid 1 because it's fun. Their hand is up. They get it. Or you spend time with kid 3 because he's destroying your lessons and ruining your life. I spend 95% of my time with my favorite kids, kid 2. Nobody notices them, but they're capable. And year after year, they get passed from class to class, and no one notices them. So there's an exercise I do every year that you might want to try. After the first day of school, I come home and I take out a sheet of paper without my roster, and I write down everybody I can remember after day 1. Then I take out my roster and see who I forgot. Who did I forget? Those are the kids I say I'll never forget them again.
And so I've often thought of things similar to that, of these kids that fly under the radar, but I've never thought of them in terms of like kid 1, kid 2, and kid 3. Thursday and Friday were all about kid 2. Teacher Talk Live is no longer going to be on YouTube. That was the last one. They'll be streaming live on Facebook. You can also find them at the Real Rap with Reynolds Facebook page. They're on there. They're also on Soundcloud, which is kind of useless. That gives me the ability to put them on iTunes as well, where you can download them as podcasts and listen to them at your leisure. Take us with you when you go, in your car, in the train, on a plane, on a mountain bike. Thursday, we slowed down in reading Julius Caesar, and we started talking about why what we were reading was important. And we started breaking down certain parts of Act 1 and relating it to students' lives. So when Caesar has a seizure, bars, maybe, I'm not sure, we talked about, have you ever seen someone in your life that you held at such high esteem, that was a hero to you, that you then saw fall? Maybe your mom got sick, your dad got sick, your grandmom died, your grandfather got hurt, and how that would feel to you in that moment. And I think the more we can connect literature or whatever our kids are reading to their real lives, it takes on a new meaning because you can see yourself in the characters. It's not just someone you're reading now, it's someone you connect to. And when we do that, the reading takes on, the book takes on a whole new life, and you actually care about what's happening now. Well, the sophomores were doing that. The freshmen were working on chunking, and there's a ton of different terms for this, but essentially, a little bit up in my grill there. One of my freshman classes has really been struggling with reading the Odyssey. So what I did was I printed out packets with the same story, but it looks like this instead. So we have portions of the Odyssey. They're all on the side in this long, slender version. Looks like a Home Depot receipt, giving them plenty of room to write on this side. Then we take each paragraph and they have to summarize that paragraph in a word or phrase and tell what the most important thing that just happened. The way that I help the students kind of envision this is I say, let's say you're watching a TV show with your best friend. My students are real into Riverdale right now. So if you're watching Riverdale and your best friend runs to the bathroom, they come back and you're like, oh my gosh, man, you know what you just missed? What did I miss? And then they summarize really quickly what that person missed. That's all I want you to do. The reason this is important is because I have far too many students, and I'm sure a lot of your students do the same thing, where they read it, yes, they read chapter 1 of a book, or they read book 9 of the Odyssey, but they have no idea what they just read. And I know that because that's the exact conversation that I have with students. Okay, who can tell me what they just read? And then I just get looks of bewilderment. And when I ask kids, I say, well, what did you just read? I don't know. Well, did you read it? Yeah, I read it. I just don't know what I just read. Chunking is forcing kids to slow down, look at what you just read, and connecting it with something. For right now, this is a really basic way of forcing kids to slow down and helping them to see what the important events are that they just read about. And then finally on Friday's assessment day. Typically in my class, it's when we take vocab tests, we take quizzes on the reading that we did that week to make sure that students are understanding what's going on so far. And I also have students do something called a weekly reflection. I'm gonna use this as an example. So without really showing you what this kid wrote, I don't think he wants it out there between he and I, but we'll share it with you for the moment. It's very simple. And the questions that are on it are, in what way did you demonstrate perseverance this week? Does not have to be in school, could be outside of school, could have been on the football field, the basketball court, when you were playing video games with your friend, but how did you do that this week? The second question is, what's something that you're looking forward to for next week? Then it has your current grade in the class so that kids don't get to the end of the trimester. We have trimesters here. That kids don't get to the end of the trimester or the marking period and say, wait, I didn't know I was failing. What do you mean I'm failing? They know every single week what their current grade is. Then we ask them something a teacher or peer complimented or talked to me about on my academics or behavior this week, forcing them to kind of like have a bit of gratitude and like be thankful that someone said something, and remembering that like, yeah, this week wasn't so bad. Somebody said something cool to you this week. And then there's a couple of like grids you have to circle, and then the last question is areas that I need to improve. And what that's doing is forcing kids to say, did I do all of my homework this week? Was I participating in class? Was I on point? Did I talk to people kindly? And I just think that this sort of reflection is something that works so well in my life that I think it's going to work well in the lives of the students also. I can't take credit for this. Miss Yonkers totally came up with this idea after a conversation that we had last year about how we are constantly reflecting on our year, on our week. It really helps us as teachers get a little bit of insight into the way that the students are thinking about their week as well. And then something interesting happened on Friday. I just think, I'm going to talk about it like this. I think that complaining can be very, very useful. I think that complaining in your life and talking about your gripes and airing it out, as it were, can be really, really useful. However, it's only really useful if you're doing something with that. And so oftentimes, this is why I like talking to students about what's going on, because I want them to have some sense of like, okay, this happened and it sucked, but what am I going to do with it now? And the same can be done for teachers. That if you eat in the faculty lounge, there's no problem with that. And sometimes it's just fun to like complain about stuff or feel bad. I mean, there's a cathartic feeling to that, right? But if over time you're not doing anything with that, it's really just a waste. And what you're doing is making your environment around you toxic. I have no interest in becoming like a leader in my school. I don't want to be like the grade level chair or the principal or the vice principal. That's not what I feel like my strength is. I always liked that guy in Braveheart that was a little bit crazy and hung out with Braveheart and just helped him out all the time instead of being Braveheart.
Excellent.
But what a strength that I do think I have is helping people to kind of like feel comfortable to share what's going on, and then helping them to think about what they can do with that hurt, with that anger, with that upsetment, with that depression. And so that was just something that in my own weekly reflection that stuck out to me. And I would encourage you this week too, to like, there's someone in your school that's really, really aggravated. There's someone who's hurt, that's sad, whether it's a student, a staff member, a teacher, kind of the same as a staff member. Maybe reach out to them this week and just see how they're feeling, and maybe help them try and figure out what to do with that next. And on that note, that was my week. That note, literally, on this cute pink paper that my wife makes for me. Saturday was a family day when we went to the Medford Apple Festival. It was magical. Here's a little bit of that. And there you have it. That's a week in the life of Reynolds. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them below. If you have comments, leave them below. I talk about this all the time. I think community is incredibly important, and so I love when folks are leaving questions and then other people are answering them below. It is awesome. And so I encourage you to do that. Check out what other people are saying, and if you have something that you want to add, something that you want to subtract, something that makes you aggravated, then go ahead and work it out. Let's do it. Everybody, I hope you have the best week of your whole life. Actually, it's a pretty tall order. I hope you just have a really great week. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Peace.